Sign it now, or I'll die right here in front of you." The old woman's voice echoed through the mansion as she held a knife to her own throat. Jae-hyun's mother, Mrs. Choi, stood trembling with tears streaming down her wrinkled face, her expensive silk hanbok shaking with every sob. On the marble floor before her lay divorce papers, and standing frozen in shock was her daughter-in-law, Sua, a beautiful young woman with kind eyes that were now filled with tears. The knife pressed deeper into Mrs. Choi's skin, and a single drop of blood appeared. "You're not good enough for my son. You come from nothing. No money, no family, no status. You're destroying the Choi family name." Mrs. Choi screamed. Jae-hyun, Sua's husband, stood between them, his face torn with agony, unable to move or speak. The servants whispered in the corners, and Jae-hyun's father sat silently in his wheelchair, looking away as if he couldn't bear to watch. Sua's hands shook as she picked up the pen. "Mother, please. I love Jae-hyun. We've been married for 3 years. I've done everything you asked. I wake up at 5 every morning to prepare your tea. But Mrs. Choi cut her off with a bitter laugh. Love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't save a dying company. My son needs to marry Chairman Lee's daughter. She'll bring 50 billion won to save our business. You." She spat the word like poison. "You bring nothing but shame." Jae-hyun finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Sua, maybe it's better this way." Those words shattered Sua's heart into a million pieces. The man she loved, the man she'd given up everything for, was agreeing with his cruel mother. With trembling fingers and tears blurring her vision, Sua signed the papers. As she walked out of the mansion into the pouring rain, she didn't know that 5 years later, the same woman who destroyed her life would come crawling back, begging on her knees for help. The rain poured down like heaven itself was crying for Sua. She walked through the dark streets with no umbrella, no coat, and nowhere to go. Her small apartment had been sold months ago to pay for Jae-hyun's mother's medical bills when Mrs. Choi pretended to be sick. Everything Sua owned was still inside the Choi mansion. Her clothes, her photos, even the small music box her dead mother had given her. But she couldn't go back. She wouldn't go back. The rain mixed with her tears, and she couldn't tell which was which anymore. People on the street stared at her expensive wedding hanbok, now soaked and ruined, wondering why this woman looked like a bride but cried like someone at a funeral. Sua's legs finally gave out, and she collapsed on a bench near Han River, shivering and broken. "I have nothing left," she whispered to the empty night. "No husband, no home, no family. What do I do now?" Suddenly, a warm coat fell over her shoulders. Sua looked up with swollen eyes and saw a tall man standing in front of her, holding an umbrella. He was handsome, with gentle eyes and an expensive suit that screamed wealth and power. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. His voice was kind, concerned. Sua wanted to say yes, to lie and pretend everything was fine, but instead, she broke down sobbing. The stranger sat beside her in silence, just holding the umbrella over her head while she cried. After a long time, he finally spoke again. "I don't know what happened to you, but I know that look. That's the look of someone who's lost everything." He paused, then added, "5 years ago, I was sitting on this exact bench, just like you. Someone helped me then. Let me help you now." Sua looked at him through her tears. "Why would you help a stranger?" The man smiled sadly. "Because sometimes strangers become the most important people in our lives." He handed her a business card. "My name is Woo Jin. If you need a job, a place to stay, or just someone to talk to, call this number." As he walked away into the rain, Sua looked at the card and gasped. The name read, Han Woo Jin, CEO of Han Group. Her hands trembled as she realized she'd just met the richest man in Seoul, and the biggest rival of the Choi family. 3 months had passed since that rainy night. Sua stared at herself in the mirror of her tiny rented room, barely recognizing the woman looking back. She had called Woo Jin's number the next day, desperate and hopeless. He gave her a job as his personal assistant and a small apartment to live in. Every day, she worked hard, learning about business, slowly rebuilding her broken heart piece by piece. Woo Jin never asked about her past, never pushed her to talk. He was patient, kind, and treated her with respect, something she'd never received from the Choi family. Sometimes, late at night, She still thought about Jae-hyun. Did he ever regret letting her go? Did he ever think about the 3 years they spent together? But those thoughts only brought pain, so she pushed them away and focused on her new life. Then one morning, Sua's phone buzzed with a news alert that made her blood run cold. The headline read, Choi Jae-hyun to marry Lee Yoona, daughter of Lee Corporation chairman, in grand wedding next month. Her hands shook as she clicked the article. There was a photo of Jae-hyun and a beautiful woman in an expensive dress, both smiling at a fancy restaurant. Lee Yoona was perfect, tall, elegant, from a rich family, everything Mrs. Choi had wanted. Everything Sua wasn't. The article mentioned how this marriage would save the struggling Choi company and create a powerful business alliance. Sua felt tears stinging her eyes, but she refused to cry. Not anymore. She had cried enough for that man. Just then, Woo Jin walked into the office and saw her face. "You saw the news," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Sua nodded, unable to speak. Woo Jin walked closer, his eyes serious and intense. "Sua, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you 3 months ago." He took a deep breath. "I know exactly who you are. I know you're Jae-hyun's ex-wife. And I know what his family did to you." Sua's heart stopped. "How? How do you know?" Woo Jin's jaw tightened. "Because 10 years ago, the Choi family destroyed my family the same way. And I've been waiting all this time for my revenge." Sua stumbled backward, her mind spinning with confusion and betrayal. You used me? Everything, the job, the apartment, your kindness, it was all fake." Her voice cracked with pain. She had trusted him, believed he was different from Jae-hyun and his cruel family. But now it felt like she was being used again, like a toy in someone else's game. Woo Jin's face softened, and he reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "No, Sua, listen to me. Yes, I knew who you were when I saw you that night. But everything I did for you was real. I genuinely wanted to help you." He ran his hand through his hair, frustration and emotion clear in his eyes. "My father owned a small company 10 years ago. It was doing well, growing. But the Choi family wanted our land, our contracts. When my father refused to sell, they destroyed him. They spread lies, ruined his reputation, and stole all his business partners. My father couldn't handle the shame and stress. He had a heart attack and died." His voice broke at the end, revealing deep pain he'd carried for years. Tears rolled down Sua's cheeks as she listened. "I'm so sorry, Woo Jin. But what does this have to do with me?" Woo Jin looked directly into her eyes. "I want to take down the Choi family business. I want them to feel the same pain they caused my father, the same pain they caused you. But I can't do it alone. I need someone who knows them from the inside, someone who understands their weaknesses." He paused, his voice becoming gentle. "Sua, you lived with them for 3 years. You know their secrets, their business dealings, their relationships. Help me. Help me make them pay for what they did to both of us." Sua's heart pounded in her chest. Part of her wanted revenge, wanted Mrs. Choi to suffer for all the cruel words and heartless treatment. But another part of her felt scared and unsure. I need time to think," she whispered. Woo Jin nodded slowly. "Take all the time you need. But remember, while you're thinking, Jae-hyun is preparing to marry another woman, and his mother is celebrating her victory." Just then, Sua's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she recognized instantly. It was the Choi mansion. Her hands trembled as she answered. "Sua." It was Jae-hyun's voice, shaking and desperate. "Please, you have to come back. Something terrible has happened to my mother." Sua stood outside Seoul Central Hospital, her heart racing with mixed feelings. Why did she come? Why did she care about Mrs. Choi after everything that woman did to her? Woo Jin had driven her here without saying a word, his face unreadable. As they walked through the sterile white hallways, Sua's mind flooded with memories. Mrs. Choi's cruel words, the way she made Sua kneel and apologize for things she didn't do, the disgusted looks, the endless insults. Yet somewhere deep inside, a small part of Sua still remembered the one time, just once, when Mrs. Choi had smiled at her. It was during their first meeting, before the marriage, when Mrs. Choi didn't know Sua came from a poor family. That smile had disappeared forever once the truth came out. Room 308, a nurse directed them. Sua's steps grew slower as they approached the room. She pushed open the door and froze. Mrs. Choi lay in the hospital bed, looking 20 years older than 3 months ago. Her once proud face was pale and thin, her expensive jewelry gone, replaced by simple hospital clothes. Jae-hyun sat beside her, his eyes red from crying. When he saw Sua, he stood up quickly, his face a mixture of shame and desperate hope. "Sua, you came." Before she could respond, Mrs. Choi's weak voice cut through the silence. Why are you here?" Even sick and weak, there was still coldness in her tone. Sua straightened her back. "Your son called me. He said something terrible happened." "What's wrong with you?" Jae-hyun's voice cracked as he spoke. "She has late-stage cancer. The doctors say she has maybe 6 months left. But there's a surgery that could save her life. It costs 500 million won. The Lee family wedding money isn't enough, and they're demanding we pay back the advance they gave us. Our company is drowning in debt." He looked at Sua with desperate eyes. "We're losing everything. And the only person who can help us now." He paused, his next words shocking everyone in the room. "Is you, Sua. Because you're working for Han Woo-jin, the richest man in Seoul." A bitter laugh escaped Sua's lips before she could stop it. The sound echoed in the quiet hospital room, cold and painful. "Let me understand this correctly," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. 3 months ago, your mother held a knife to her throat and forced me to divorce you. She called me worthless, shameful, and not good enough for your family. She took everything from me, my home, my husband, my dignity. I left that mansion with nothing but wet clothes and a broken heart." She looked directly at Jae-hyun, and he couldn't meet her eyes. "You stood there and watched. You agreed with her. You said, maybe it's better this way. You didn't fight for me, didn't defend me, didn't even say goodbye." Her voice grew stronger, years of pain pouring out. "And now that you're desperate and poor, now that karma has finally caught up with your family, you want my help?" Mrs. Choi tried to sit up, her face angry even in her weakness. "How dare you speak to us this way? We raised you, gave you a home, treated you like family." Sua's eyes flashed with rage. "Treated me like family? You made me wake up at 5 every morning to serve you tea. You criticized every meal I cooked, every word I spoke, every breath I took. You made me kneel on the floor and apologize because I accidentally stepped on your designer bag. You told me I was a stain on your family name." Tears streamed down her face, but her voice never wavered. "The only reason you want me now is because I have access to money. If I was still poor, still worthless in your eyes, you would spit on me if you saw me on the street." Jae-hyun stepped forward, his hands clasped together like he was praying. "Sua, please. I know we don't deserve your help. I know I failed you as a husband. But my mother is dying. Whatever she did, whatever I did, she doesn't deserve to die like this." His voice broke completely. "Please, I'm begging you. Just talk to Han Woo-jin for us. Ask him to lend us the money. We'll pay it back, I swear." Sua wiped her tears and turned to walk away. But just as she reached the door, Mrs. Choi's weak voice stopped her with words that nobody expected. "Wait. I'm sorry." Sua's hand froze on the door handle. She must have heard wrong. Mrs. Choi, the woman who never apologized to anyone, who believed she was always right, who treated everyone beneath her like dirt, that woman just said sorry? Slowly, Sua turned around. Mrs. Choi was struggling to sit up, her proud shoulders now bent and weak. Tears rolled down her wrinkled cheeks. "I said, I'm sorry." The words came out like they physically hurt her to say. "I was wrong. I was cruel to you. I treated you terribly because I was scared." Her voice shook with emotion. "Scared?" Sua whispered, confused. "Scared of what?" Mrs. Choi looked down at her trembling hands. "Scared of losing everything. My husband's business was failing even before you married Jae-hyun. I thought if I could make my son marry into a rich family, we would be saved. I thought money and status were the only things that mattered in this world." She coughed weakly, and Jae-hyun rushed to give her water. But I was wrong. So wrong. When you left that night in the rain, I felt victorious. I thought I had won, that I had saved my family, Mrs. Choi continued, her tears falling faster now. But the Lee family never truly respected us. They saw us as desperate beggars. Lee Yuna treated Jae-hyun like a servant, not a husband. The wedding preparations became a nightmare of demands and insults. Then when my cancer diagnosis came, they immediately cancelled everything and demanded their money back. They abandoned us the moment we became worthless to them. She looked up at Sua with genuine pain in her eyes. They treated us exactly how I treated you. And that's when I finally understood. I destroyed the one person who truly loved my son, who worked hard every day, who never complained, who tried so desperately to make us happy. You were the daughter I should have treasured, but instead, I threw you away like garbage. Mrs. Choi slowly, painfully, moved from her bed. Jae-hyun tried to stop her, but she pushed his hands away. Then, in front of everyone, Mrs. Choi lowered herself to her knees on the cold hospital floor. Please, Sua. I'm begging you. Not for the money, not for the business, but please, forgive me before I die. Outside the hospital room, hidden where no one could see him, Woo Jin stood watching through the small window in the door. His hands were clenched into fists, his face dark with an emotion Sua couldn't see. This wasn't part of his revenge plan. And he didn't like it one bit. Sua's whole body trembled as she looked at Mrs. Choi kneeling on the floor. This was the moment she had dreamed about during those painful 3 months, seeing this proud woman humbled, seeing her suffer, seeing her beg. But now that it was happening, Sua felt no joy, no satisfaction. Instead, her heart ached with a confusing mix of anger, sadness, and something she didn't want to feel, pity. Get up, Sua said quietly. Please, just get up. Jae-hyun helped his mother back to the bed. Mrs. Choi looked at Sua with desperate, hopeful eyes. Does this mean, you'll help us? Sua opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, the hospital room door burst open. Woo Jin stood in the doorway, his face cold and hard like stone. She won't help you, he said firmly. Because I won't allow it. Everyone turned to stare at him in shock. Jae-hyun's face went pale. Han Woo Jin, what are you doing here? Woo Jin walked into the room slowly, his expensive shoes clicking on the floor. I'm here to make sure Sua doesn't make a mistake. You see, Mrs. Choi, your apology is very touching. Your tears are very convincing. But I know your family's history of lies and manipulation. He turned to Sua, his eyes intense. Don't fall for this act. She's only sorry because she's dying and desperate. If she was healthy and rich, she would still treat you like dirt. Mrs. Choi shook her head weakly. No, that's not true anymore. I genuinely... But Woo Jin cut her off with a harsh laugh. 10 years ago, my father begged your husband for mercy. He knelt just like you're doing now. He cried and pleaded for just a little more time to pay back a loan. Do you remember what your husband said to him? The room went silent. Mrs. Choi's face showed she remembered. Woo Jin's voice turned ice cold. He said, begging won't save you. Money is the only thing that matters in this world. Then he destroyed my father's company and reputation. My father died alone, broken and ashamed. He looked directly at Mrs. Choi. So forgive me if I don't believe your sudden change of heart. Sua stood frozen between them. On one side, the family that hurt her but now seemed truly sorry. On the other side, the man who saved her but wanted revenge. Sua, Woo Jin said softly, reaching for her hand. Choose. Them or me. The hospital room felt like it was closing in on Sua. Everyone's eyes were on her, waiting for her answer. Her heart pounded so loud she could hear it in her ears. Woo Jin's hand was still reaching toward her, strong and steady, the hand that had pulled her out of darkness 3 months ago. But when she looked at Mrs. Choi's tear-stained face, she saw something she'd never seen before, genuine regret. Jae-hyun watched her with desperate, guilty eyes, the eyes of a man who knew he'd lost the best thing in his life. Sua took a deep breath and stepped back from everyone. I need to say something, and I need all of you to listen. Her voice was calm but firm. Woo Jin, you saved my life. You gave me hope when I had none. I will always be grateful to you for that. But I won't be a weapon for your revenge. Your father's pain was real, and what the Choi family did to him was unforgivable. But becoming like them won't honor his memory, it will only create more pain. She turned to face Mrs. Choi and Jae-hyun. And you, both of you broke my heart into pieces. You made me feel worthless and small. For 3 years, I tried so hard to be good enough, but nothing I did was ever enough. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but her voice stayed strong. Mrs. Choi, I hear your apology. I see your regret. But I can't just forget 3 years of cruelty because you're dying. Forgiveness isn't something you can demand, it's something that has to be earned. Jae-hyun stepped forward. Then tell us how. Tell us what we need to do, and we'll do it. I'll do anything to make this right. Sua shook her head sadly. That's the problem, Jae-hyun. You can't make it right. You can't undo the past. The damage is done. She looked at all three of them, Woo Jin, Mrs. Choi, and Jae-hyun. I'm not choosing anyone. I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing to walk away from all of this pain and anger and revenge. I'm choosing to live my own life, free from all of you. She walked toward the door, but Woo Jin blocked her path. His face showed hurt and anger. If you walk away now, you're walking away from me too. From everything we could be together. Sua smiled sadly. I know. But I need to find out who I am without being someone's wife, someone's assistant, or someone's revenge tool. She gently moved past him and opened the door. Behind her, 3 voices called her name at the same time. But Sua kept walking, and for the first time in years, she felt free. 6 months passed like pages turning in a book. Sua stood in front of a small but beautiful bakery, her bakery, looking at the sign that read, Sua's Sweet Dreams. She had used her savings and taken a small business loan to make her childhood dream come true. Every morning, she woke up excited to bake bread, cakes, and cookies. Her customers loved her warm smile and delicious treats. For the first time in her life, she was truly happy and independent. The little bell above the door chimed, and an elderly woman walked in. I'd like 6 cupcakes, please. My granddaughter is visiting today. Sua smiled brightly and carefully packed the cupcakes with colorful ribbons. As she worked, she thought about how different her life was now. She had her own place, her own business, her own identity. She wasn't Mrs. Choi's daughter-in-law or Woo Jin's assistant anymore. She was just Sua, and that was enough. But late that night, as she was closing the bakery, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. Hello, she answered cautiously. Sua. It's me, Jae-hyun. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't heard from him in 6 months. What do you want? Her voice was guarded. There was a long pause, then Jae-hyun's voice came through, shaking and broken. She's gone. My mother. She passed away this morning. Sua's hand flew to her mouth. Despite everything, tears filled her eyes. The surgery. Did she not get it? Jae-hyun's voice cracked. No. We couldn't afford it. The company went bankrupt 2 months ago. We lost everything. The mansion, the cars, everything. We've been living in a small apartment. My father's health got worse from the stress. And my mother. He paused, crying openly now. She spent her last months trying to be a better person. She volunteered at a shelter, helped poor families, apologized to everyone she'd ever hurt. She kept a journal, and every page mentioned you, how sorry she was, how she wished she could see you one more time. Sua's tears fell silently as she listened. There's something else, Jae-hyun continued. She left you something in her will. Can you please come to the lawyer's office tomorrow? Please, Sua. This is the last thing I'll ever ask of you. Before Sua could answer, another voice spoke in the background of Jae-hyun's call, a familiar voice that made her freeze. It was Woo Jin. What is Woo Jin doing there? Sua asked in shock. The next day, Sua walked into the lawyer's office with her heart pounding. Inside, she found Jae-hyun looking thin and tired, wearing cheap clothes instead of his usual designer suits. Beside him sat Woo Jin, looking as handsome and wealthy as ever, but his eyes seemed different, softer, sadder. The lawyer, an old man with kind eyes, gestured for Sua to sit. "Thank you for coming, Miss Sua. Before we discuss Mrs. Choi's will, Mr. Han Woo-jin has asked to speak first." Sua turned to Woo-jin, confused. He took a deep breath and began. "6 months ago, after you left the hospital, I was angry. Angry at you for walking away, angry at myself for trying to control you. I went home and looked at my father's old photos, and I realized something terrible. I had become exactly like the Choi family, cold, obsessed with revenge, using people for my own purposes." His voice trembled with emotion. "You were right, Sua. Revenge wouldn't honor my father. It would only dishonor his memory." Woo-jin continued, "So I made a decision. I went to the Choi family and offered them a deal. I would pay for Mrs. Choi's surgery and help save their company with one condition, that they spend the rest of their lives being kind and helping others the way my father once did." Sua gasped. You tried to help them?" Woo-jin nodded. "But Mrs. Choi refused. She said she didn't deserve my help or my mercy. She said the only way she could truly change was by experiencing the same suffering she caused others. So she refused the surgery and spent her remaining time doing good deeds." He pulled out a thick journal and handed it to Sua. "She asked me to give this to you. Every page is a letter to you, apologizing, explaining, hoping you'd understand." Jae-hyun spoke up, his voice barely a whisper. "My mother's last words were about you. She said, 'Tell Sua she was right. Money and status mean nothing. Love and kindness, those are the only things that truly matter.' She tried to teach me that, but I was too blind to see it." Tears streamed down Sua's face as she held the journal. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Now, for the will. Mrs. Choi left you her most precious possession." He pulled out a small music box, the exact same one Sua's mother had given her, the one she'd left behind at the mansion. She kept it safe all these months. "And there's a note." Sua opened the note with shaking hands. It read, "Dear Sua, I'm returning what I took from you. I wish I could return the years and happiness I stole, but I cannot. Please forgive me, not for my sake, but so you can truly be free. You deserved a better mother-in-law. You deserved better than all of us." But there was one more line that made Sua's heart stop. "I've also left you something else, my son's heart. He never stopped loving you. If you can find it in your heart to give him one more chance, please do. But if you can't, I'll understand. Love, Mother Choi." The lawyer's office fell silent. Sua clutched the music box to her chest, tears flowing freely down her face. She looked at Jae-hyun, really looked at him for the first time in 6 months. He was different, humbler, broken, but somehow more real than he'd ever been. The arrogant, weak man who couldn't stand up to his mother was gone. In his place sat someone who had learned what truly mattered through painful loss. Jae-hyun stood up slowly and walked toward her, then did something he'd never done before. He knelt down, just like his mother had in the hospital. "Sua, I don't expect you to take me back. I don't deserve that. I was a coward who chose my mother's approval over the woman I loved. I watched her destroy you and did nothing." His voice broke with genuine remorse. "But I want you to know that losing you was the biggest mistake of my life. These 6 months without you taught me that all the money and status in the world mean nothing without love. My mother learned that lesson too late. I don't want to make the same mistake." Sua wiped her tears and took a deep breath. "Jae-hyun, stand up." He stood, looking at her with hopeful, terrified eyes. "I forgive you," she said quietly. "And I forgive your mother. Not because you deserve it, but because Woo-jin was right. I need to forgive to truly be free." She saw relief wash over his face, but she held up her hand. "But forgiveness doesn't mean we go back to how things were. That marriage, that version of us, is dead and buried. We can't bring it back to life." Jae-hyun's face fell, and he nodded, accepting her words. Then Sua surprised everyone, including herself. "However," she continued softly, "maybe we can build something new. Not as husband and wife, not yet, maybe not ever. But as two people who both learned hard lessons about life, love, and what really matters." She looked at Woo-jin, who was watching with gentle, understanding eyes. "Woo-jin, Thank you for letting go of revenge. Thank you for showing me that people can change." Then she looked back at Jae-hyun. "If you want to prove you've changed, really changed, then prove it through your actions. Start by helping others like your mother did in her final months. Become the man I believed you could be when I first fell in love with you." Jae-hyun's eyes filled with tears of hope. "I will. I promise I will." 1 year later, Sua's bakery had expanded to 3 locations. She was successful, independent, and happy. Jae-hyun worked at a community center, helping poor families and teaching business skills to young people. He visited her bakery every week, bringing flowers, never pushing, just showing through quiet actions that he was becoming better. Woo Jin remained her dear friend, and sometimes she wondered if there could be something more. But she wasn't in a hurry. She had learned that the most important relationship was the one with herself. And as for Mrs. Choi, Sua visited her grave every month, placing fresh flowers and whispering, "I forgive you, mother. Rest in peace." The music box sat on her bakery counter, playing its gentle melody, a reminder that even the most broken things could be treasured again, and that sometimes the people who hurt us the most can teach us the greatest lessons about forgiveness, strength, and love. True healing begins when we forgive, not for others, but for ourselves. In letting go of anger and embracing personal growth, we can reclaim our peace and rebuild our lives from the inside out. The journey to self-love and empowerment requires strength, but it is the most rewarding path we can walk. Have you ever experienced betrayal or heartbreak? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's support each other in the journey of forgiveness and healing. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more drama stories.